There are several preconceptions that have been hung around Middle-earth's Shadow of Mordor's neck. Accusations of laziness and how its central mechanics are seemingly just cherry-picked from the genre's strongest offerings like Assassin's Creed and Batman Arkham City, as well as the unfavourable association that licensed products are genuinely poor software. In fact, most Lord of the Rings games have almost been universally average. I was pleasantly surprised then to find out that Shadows of Mordor not only dispels such qualms but proves that it's a finely tuned action-adventure title with plenty of ideas of its own. Easily the finest of systems that Shadows of Mordor introduces is the Nemesis system. Set across the barren plains of Mordor is an orc hierarchy that changes depending on your interactions with the world. It's a hugely immersive mechanic with the Uruks you encounter shaped by your interactions with them, each possessing their own unique traits and behavioural quirks. Near the beginning of the game I had many encounters with Mormog the funny one. I killed him twice, he killed me once, there was a final standoff and a skirmish between me and him. Every encounter he had different scars on his face, thanks to many lacerations that I'd put there from my sword. And because of all these encounters, you end up forming small but meaningful relationships with the enemies that you encounter, spurring grudge matches and vengeance missions. In fact, most of the first few hours of me playing the game were spent scouring the land for those orcs that had previously wronged me, and plenty more joined the list as I was killed by a previously anonymous orc. And while this mechanic is extremely fun, it's not there just for fun. It's definitely central to the narrative, with hero Talion witnessing his family slain at the blade of the Black Hand of Sauron, a high-up lieutenant that yields power over his armies, and then Talion sets out on a mission for bloody revenge. But getting to the Black Hand isn't going to be easy, and it involves passing up through the ranks of orcs and through his war chiefs. And basically it's up to you whether you use the Nemesis system to create advantages on your side in completing these side missions, or sometimes story missions that require you to find information from the high up war chiefs about the Black Hand. For example, captains can be interrogated for information on war chiefs' personal bodyguards, and the hunting down of those bodyguards before fighting a war chief himself will present a huge advantage. This only grows more complex as options become available to you as you progress to gain further abilities that basically enable you to manipulate the orc infrastructure by recruiting enemies to your side. Even though this is a new side story in the Lord of the Rings franchise, I think Tolkien nerds definitely won't be disappointed. As a Tolkien nerd myself, I found that the hours of dialogue and the huge diversity in characters was a magnificent achievement, and it really elevated Shadows of Mordor's combat above just hack and slash trappings. Speaking of combat, this is one area where the game really excels. It does follow a template in the form of Arkham City, but this is definitely no bad thing. The Arkham style combat serves Monolith's mature vision on the Lord of the Rings brand with punchy, flowing and really visceral, responsive combat. There's a slick combination of offensive moves and counters, and once you get used to this, you can turn a garrison of blood-hungry orcs into mincemeat. The moveset is bolstered by your Wraith abilities, and familiarity once again strikes here as you view the Wraith world. It does bear kind of resemblance to the detective mode in some certain Batman games. The difference here is that your Wraith mode also has added enhancements for combat. Your bow and arrow, for example, is entirely a Wraith trait, which, while slightly odd, does enable the bow to be used as a teleportation device as well as a weapon. But linking back to the Nemesis system, the most impressive ability that your Wraith gives you is the ability to dominate opponents, which enables you to enter the minds of the orcs and interrogate them to set them against their own masters. Yet again, for all the Tolkien fans, this ability to take over the minds of the orcs gives some convenient context to the Tolkien established lore, with the Wraith himself revealed to be as Celebrimbor, the elf who forged the Rings of Power. What perhaps doesn't seem to make much sense at first, as in Celebrimbor and Talion are set out to discover why they were destined to unite, You run into some familiar faces along the way, and unless you've not seen the trailers, a little spoiler here, there are some cameos from characters such as Gollum. Something I found a little bit strange about the script and the setting was that this game is clearly trying to match or be familiar with the films, but it's very, very dark and morbid compared to the slight lightheartedness of the films. In fact, one skit involves an orc looking for a sharper blade to mutilate a victim, which just seems a wee bit darker and more mature than the Lord of the Rings games. But this is no bad thing in my opinion. Another thing that Lord of the Rings films fans anyway shouldn't get too excited about is the setting, and that is that the world itself is far less engaging than the entirety of Middle-earth. Mordor, as you may remember it, was an ashen wasteland in the films with an imposing mountain spewing magma, whilst a flaming eye watched over all the orcs and everyone else. Within Shadow of Mordor, because it's set before the events of Lord of the Rings and just after The Hobbit, basically such icons don't exist yet, and Mordor itself is much healthier and therefore slightly less interesting. Kind of a bland collection of toppled structures and makeshift orc camps. As you start to spread outwards and unlock more of the map though, there is slight distinguishing features but not much to make it hugely different. So it might be a little bit disappointing that Shadows of Mordor couldn't quite match the excellence of the Nemesis system throughout the entire game, with a more engaging world to explore. But I found the characters along with the excellent voice acting more than enough to spur me through the campaign. And there's no doubt that as you play Shadows of Mordor, you can't help but think that it is similar to numerous other games that have come before it. But by adding the Nemesis system, it basically results in a game that is surprisingly expansive and extremely enjoyable to play. And in fact, I found it more compelling than both the Arkham games and definitely more compelling than the Assassin's Creed games.
You're already half dead. Killing you will be a mercy.
Not to mention the game has absolutely fantastic graphics on the PS4, long view distances, incredible texture work, and the animation is fluid and fantastic. Also the music, it feels as though it could have come straight from the films, so there's no going wrong there either. And because of all these, it just feels as though this is a really brilliant game that is worth anyone's time, even if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan. But if you've picked up the game on launch day, then what do you think of it? Do you think it's just a copy of the Assassin's Creed games and the Arkham games, or do you think it's got a little bit more to it because of the Nemesis system? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks very much for watching.